Raiders head coach Pete Carroll will open up training camp as he meets with the media this morning. Plus, we talk biggest strength, biggest weakness, and the X factor for the Silver and Black. That plus more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for July 22nd, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast, or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page, you know we appreciate both. Show continues to grow each and every day because of your consistent support and the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day by way of the YouTube page. He takes a lot of pride in his work, makes sure that, you know, we are second to none. I appreciate that. And Raider Nation, I know you appreciate that as well. So shout out Ari. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Plenty of feedback on everything we've been talking about leading up to where we are right now, right? Heading into training camp, heading into hearing from head coach Pete Carroll, heading into seeing these players put it all together and try to get this 53-man roster set so they can go take on New England week 1 of the NFL season. So plenty of feedback to get to. We'll hear from you, your calls and texts. We'll do that coming up. Segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll talk about the biggest strength, the biggest weakness, and the X factor for the Raiders. It's a series that I started on Monday on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, on Raider Nation Radio 920, and we focused in on the Silver and Black. Now, we're also going to talk about the biggest strength, weakness, and X factor for all the teams in the AFC West, right? The Chargers, the Broncos, and the Chiefs, and then we'll do that for every opponent on the Raiders schedule. But just for this show, we're definitely just going to focus in on the Silver and Black. Again, biggest strength, biggest weakness, and the X factor as I see it. And, of course, it's something I want your feedback on as well at 707-654-4693. That'll come up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and really just has to do with Pete Carroll opening up training camp and also a few changes that the Raiders have made to their broadcast team and some Raider content that will be coming your way this upcoming season. We'll jump right into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of this show, and that's FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So this morning, blessed to have the opportunity to be at the Intermountain Health Performance Center, 11:30 a.m. That's when the supposed to be time that Pete Carroll is going to meet with the media. It should be right around there. He's usually right on time, and everything since he's been on the staff has been pretty much as a matter of fact, so you could definitely check that out. But this will be the opportunity we get to ask about Christian Wilkins, who they put on the PUP list on Friday. How are they feeling? How close is he to be back, right? Do they think he'll still be on the PUP list when it comes to the end of training camp, when they're setting up the 53-man roster? Is he going to miss the first 4 games of the season? Not saying he's going to answer every one of those questions, but we'll definitely ask, right? Expectations for this training camp. Who is he looking forward to seeing? The young guys, right? Are they going to be able to, ride it out with the young guys? Are they going to have to go out and possibly bring in a veteran from outside the building because maybe the cornerback room, the wide receiver room, or others needs a little bit of, a little juice, a little jolt into their veins? So that's something that we'll talk to Pete Carroll about as well, and just see how pumped he is for the opportunity to have another training camp since he's been off the sideline and being in Seattle, as he was gone from the sideline for a year, as he was put up into the front office as like a consultant role. And obviously that's not what he wants to do. He wants to be the head coach. So just get all things for Pete Carroll. Obviously, if he says anything that's really big and important and stands out to me, of course, we'll bring it to you here on the Locked On Raiders podcast for Wednesday's show. But excited about that opportunity. Again, 11:30 this morning, we'll meet with Pete Carroll at the Intermountain Health Performance Center. Also, want to go ahead and bring you a couple updates. One we found out about on Friday, and this was the Raiders broadcast. There's been a slight change to the way that you will consume it. Jason Horowitz remains the voice of the Silver and Black, but Captain Kirk Morrison takes over as the color analyst, taking over for Lincoln Kennedy, who's still part of the broadcast team. He's going to be doing pregame and postgame show, and I think he's going to be doing a few other things. This is something I actually knew was in the works going back to mandatory minicamp. Me and Lincoln are very close, so he let me know that there was these changes being made, but that wasn't my business to go and talk about. So I wanted to wait until the Raiders made that official announcement. They did that as of Friday, and Kirk Morrison, similar to Lincoln Kennedy, is a guy that I have a lot of respect for. He's a guy that's very knowledgeable when he talks Raiders, when he talks football in general. He's a guy that I definitely listen to. He's been grinding ever since he played in the NFL as a former third-round pick of the Silver and Black, to everything he's done with ESPN, color analyst. He's done a lot of different work. He has a lot of irons in the fire. And like I said, I respect his hustle and his grind. So he'll be a fantastic addition to the broadcast team, no doubt about it. Matter of fact, the statement that the Raiders put out on Friday, Kirk Morrison joins Jason Horowitz in the radio booth. Will serve as an analyst, commencing with the regular season opener on September 7th at New England. Kirk Morrison said, "This is a dream come true," said Morrison, who was born in Oakland into a family of Raider fans. "I stand on the shoulders of guys that came before me." He said, "I feel like I'm in a unique position. I'm a unicorn in my own right. I've had the honor of being a fan first, so I know what the fan perspective is. I've had the honor of being a player for the Raiders, and now I hold the ultimate honor of being the analyst and the eyes, ears of not only the players, but also the fans. I'm connecting the two. I'm telling the stories of the player as a former player, but I'm also giving the fans what they need to know because I also sat in their seat. It's kind of like this big triangle, fan, player, analyst, and I connect it all for Raider Nation." Again, Kirk Morrison is going to do a fantastic job, and the good thing is not losing Lincoln Kennedy completely from the broadcast. He will be part of pregame, postgame, and knowing Lincoln, he'll probably have his hands in more than just that. So looking forward to that, and Jason Horowitz obviously does a really good job as far as the play-by-play, the voice of the Silver and Black, and really should have brought that to the table on Monday's show, but ran out of time for the news and notes, especially when I started talking about Christian Wilkins and him being on the PUP list, and what do they do next, and what direction will they go, who's going to fill that void, and how long possibly could he be on it. It kind of worked out well that I did not be able to bring it to the table on Monday, because I was able to combine it with the other news that we found out Monday afternoon about Raider content provided from the Silver and Black. And the fact is, former NBA star Baron Davis, that's right, remember the Golden State Warriors? Remember the We Believe team that knocked off the Dallas Mavericks? He's going to host the Talk of the Nation. So the Raiders put out a statement on Monday afternoon. Former NBA star Baron Davis, a longtime Raider fan, is set to host Raiders Talk of the Nation. Davis forged his allegiance to the Silver and Black while growing up in L.A., where he followed the Raiders as the '83 team gave the city its first world championship of professional football with a win in Super Bowl 18. The two-time NBA All-Star turned businessman and media personality will provide insight for the 30-minute sit-down interview series that explores the lifestyle, culture, and community impact of the Silver and Black. It's funny, when that came out on Monday, I was just at Summer League, and Summer League just got wrapped up here in Las Vegas at the Thomas & Mack Center on Sunday. And the day that I did my radio show from Summer League, it wasn't last Friday, but the Friday before, actually happened to see Baron Davis at the Thomas & Mack, and just on a whim tried to get him on my radio show just as a kind of a last-second guest, even threw a T-shirt from Raider Nation Radio 920 at him. He took it. He said, I'll try to get back, but I knew it was a small chance that he was going to make it back. A game was getting ready to start, but I had no idea that this was in the works. So Baron Davis is going to host Talk of the Nation, and he said in the statement, "I'm super excited about this opportunity to engage with members of the organization as well as Raider Nation. As a fan and former athlete, it's going to be fun to be able to tap into players and coaches' personalities." And again, as a guy growing up in the Bay Area, that big-time Warrior fan, and was a big fan of that We Believe team. And again, they knocked off the Dallas Mavericks when the Mavericks were the best team in the league, and they were coached by Avery Johnson at the time. And you saw what the Warriors were able to do. And of course, Baron Davis had that iconic dunk that will always be in the memory of NBA fans from many years ago. So he'll be a nice addition to that show as well, and just a few additions that the Raiders have made to not only their game day broadcast, but also the Raider content that they put out, Silver and Black Productions and Raiders.com. You can find it as your one-stop shop. So that's some exciting news to talk about as well. And of course, the most important news, Pete Carroll opening up training camp at 11:30 this morning, talking all things Silver and Black, getting you ready for the first day of practice, which comes up on Wednesday. So when the Raiders take the field for practice on Wednesday, we'll be looking at what their biggest strength is, what their biggest weakness is, and the X factor. So let's go ahead and talk about it coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you about one of the great sponsors here on the show, and that is Rugiet Ready. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, 15 minutes. And effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. I say it in air quotes, confident. right? And traditional options haven't worked. Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. And Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor, ships your treatment directly and discreetly to your door. There's plenty of great customer reviews you can check out on their site just to know that I'm not just telling you something, but it's actual. The proof is there again on their website. So what do you have to do? Well, head to their website, Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet, RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into a conversation that I started on my radio show on Monday. Biggest strength, biggest weakness, and X factor. And it's something that I always like to focus on going into training camp. And then as we watch and observe training camp, we see the preseason. And as they set the 53-man roster up, I like to reevaluate and said, okay, now that this is all said and done, where do I believe their biggest strength, their biggest weakness, and their X factor comes from? And so it's funny, as I was going through this on my radio show on Monday, I thought about the biggest strength. And I went to the offensive side of things, which is funny because last year going into Costa Mesa, California for their training camp, it was all about the defense. I thought the biggest strength was going to be the defense. I thought they were going to do the heavy lifting, and the offense was just going to have to complement them, right? Have a solid run game and complementary play from the quarterback position, and they were going to do just fine. Well, we know how that all played out. It ended up being a 4-win season, right? A lot of injuries played a role. The defense was good, right? They were still ranked top 15, but they weren't what we expected them to be and couldn't overcome the issues that the offense had. But now you think about Geno Smith coming in as the quarterback. They traded for him. Ashton Genty got the run game activated with the number 6 overall pick, the guy who was an absolute stud at Boise State, right? Brock Bowers in year 2, and he showed what he can do year 1 with a plethora of different quarterbacks throwing on the ball, from Gardner Minshew to Aiden O'Connell and even Desmond Ridder, right? So there's so many unknowns at the quarterback position last year, and Brock Bowers was still fantastic. Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. He's a highly creative offensive coordinator, where we had so many questions about Luke Getsy and what he was going to bring to the table last year. Remember the conversation we were having about Luke Getsy was he the problem in Chicago, or was it the personnel in Chicago? And I think we all found out that it was a combination of the two, but Luke Getsy's offense was not very good, not very creative. Not that, he had a whole lot to work with, especially when he got tasked with Gardner Minshew as his starting quarterback. So that was tough as well. But this year, I feel like that the biggest strength for this team, because there's so much expectation, especially with the drafting of Genty and what they've been able to bring in, Jack Besh, the second-round pick, Dante Thornton Jr., a guy who can truly stretch the field as long as he's able to be out there on the field consistently. And the offensive line, obviously, they've got to put in their work. They've got to come together as quickly as possible. I believe 3 out of the 5 spots on the offensive line are already kind of spoken for, and the 2 guard spots are the ones that we'll be looking at. Left tackle, Colton Miller. Center is already JPJ. And right tackle, I believe they're going to move forward with DJ Glaze. Again, the left guard and right guard will be where the competition comes from. But those come together and they stay healthy. Obviously, that's a big if. Then all of a sudden, right, the offense looks like it could be the strength of this Raiders team. And then you're looking for the defense to complement them, play at a high level. But there is a lot of unknown, which actually takes me to the biggest weakness. I think it's just that. The unknown. I don't want to say the defense is going to be the weakness because I don't think that would be accurate. I think the defensive line has an opportunity to be really special. Obviously, Christian Wilkins is a big question mark, but we know what Max Crosby brings to the table. He's healthy. He's back. He's ready to go. Only played in 12 games last season. First time he's ever in his career missed any action. Malcolm Kuntz is back from injury. So assuming, and it's a big assumption, he's coming back from that torn ACL that missed the whole season last year, and he's coming back fully healthy. He has a chance to be, a big-time player for him. Tyree Wilson, going into year 3, he could play outside, he could play inside, right? The Raiders have some depth, as I rolled out at the defensive tackle position, even without Christian Wilkins, even though you want the big fella out there. But the unknown that I'm really talking about when it comes to the defense is the secondary. It's a lot of youth. Like right now, today, I can't tell you who the starting outside corners are going to be. And oh, by the way, let's not forget about the nickel corner. Remember, Nate Hobbs is in Green Bay now. So I believe it's going to be Darnay Holmes, but that's a position. Lincoln Kennedy talks about it all the time on our Raider Squad show, that Nate Hobbs was a hell of a Raider and played that position. That is not an easy position. You've got to be able to have a guy that can hold down that nickel corner spot. It's very important. I think Darnay Holmes is going to do that, but he's got to show up and show out at that spot to hold it down, because that is a big void left by Nate Hobbs. But as far as the secondary goes, I can't tell you who the starting corners are. I know what it was in OTAs and mandatory minicamp. It was Eric Stokes, and it was Darian Porter, the third-round pick out of Iowa State. Is that what it's going to be when training camp's over and the preseason's over and the 53-man roster set? Possibly, but I don't know that, right? You got Jacorian Bennett that's going to make a case for why he needs to be out there. Cam Richardson, the second-year guy, is going to make an argument for why he needs to be out there. I've already mentioned Darian Porter, already mentioned Eric Stokes, right? Those are a couple of guys. There's a handful of guys that could make a case for why they need to be out there. And then at some point there could be the case that says, yeah, these guys aren't picking it up as quickly as we thought they were. Maybe we need to go outside and bring in a veteran, right? So that's going to be something that's unknown. How does this secondary come together? Also, the linebacking room. They're not young, but they're all brand new, right? From a Landon Roberts, who comes over from Pittsburgh. Devin White comes over from H-Town, from Houston. And then you've got Jermaine Pratt, who comes over from Cincinnati. These are all veterans, but they haven't played together before. So how quickly can they come together? How creative can Patrick Graham get with that linebacking room? Right, I think that there's going to be some specialties for Devin White. I think that he's going to do more than just be a traditional linebacker. He might be a guy that you see if his legs are under him and he's healthy, like he said he was at mandatory minicamp. Maybe he's the guy that's getting after the quarterback. Maybe he's rushing the quarterback with Jermaine Pratt and Landon Roberts on the field as the true linebackers that are, maybe dropping in coverage. And, so another thing that Lincoln brought up, and he brought it up on the Raiders Squad show on Monday, who's going to be the linebacker that's going to run with the running backs out of the backfield, right? That was something that he believed that Divine Diablo did and got better at doing while he was with the Raiders. Well, Diablo's now in Atlanta with the Falcons. We know Robert Spillane, he went to the Patriots, so he's there. He got a big money deal. So there's a lot of unknown because, well, these guys in the linebacking room, they haven't played together. And then obviously the question about Christian Wilkins. Will he return? Will it be before they set the 53-man roster? Will he have to miss some time in the regular season? We don't know at that part. So I think the biggest weakness for the Raiders is really the unknown. And obviously, you want to take it a step further. I know I said that the offense is the biggest strength, but there's a little bit of unknown when it comes to the offense as well, and that's the wide receiving room. They have Jacoby Myers, we know that, but Jack Besh is a rookie. Dante Thornton Jr. is a rookie, and Trey Tucker is a second-year or third-year guy, that hasn't really defined himself. So, there's been questions about the wide receiver room. I think that the Raiders can mask that and work with what they have because they do have Brock Bowers, they do have Big Mike, and I think that those guys could be factors. Ian Thomas as well. I like the tight end room in general, and I like the different guys that they have in the running back room. So that's why I still think the biggest strength is the offense. But there's a couple questions as well, a little unknown as well when it comes to the offense. The biggest X factor, I say it's the coaching staff, right? Pete Carroll now can look at Andy Reid. Pete Carroll can now look at Jim Harbaugh. Pete Carroll can now look at Sean Payton, look him in the eye and say that, yeah, my stones are just as big as your stones, right? It's not going to be one of those situations where Andy Reid is that much better of a coach because he's been there, done that, and the Raiders head coach doesn't have that experience, right? They can't say that about Pete Carroll. He's been there, done that. He's defeated all those guys, right? He knows what they're all about. He's been around the league long enough. The proof of concept is out there. So Pete Carroll gives you confidence that he can stand on the field across from that head coach, and it's an equal playing field, right? I think we'd still all consider Andy Reid probably the best in the game right now just because of all the production and all the wins that he's had. But Pete Carroll ain't nothing to shake a stick at. And Jim Harbaugh, we know what he brings to the table. We know what he's done in college and the NFL. Pete Carroll, the same thing. Sean Payton, we know that he won a Super Bowl as well. So all four of these head coaches in the AFC West, they've all won at the highest level, and they've all won wherever they've been at. And Pete Carroll, to his point, has won in college and the pros. So there's that. But it doesn't stop there. I think Patrick Graham coming back as a defensive coordinator, keeping that continuity there is a big deal. There's a reason why the Raiders gave him a raise to stay there. They wanted the continuity there. And it's funny, something Paul Gutierrez, now of Raiders.com, pointed out to me the other day when he joined my radio show was when Pete Carroll took over in Seattle, all he did was keep the defensive line coach, as far as guys that were already there on staff. He kept the defensive line coach, and he kept the defensive coordinator. And you know what he did with the Raiders? He kept the defensive line coach in Robbie Leonard and the defensive coordinator in Pat Graham, right? So there's something to being said about that. And I think he kept the special teams coordinator as well in Seattle, and the special team coordinator, Tom McMahon, is still with the Raiders as well. But I think Patrick Graham, just having another year under his belt, in the organization and with the majority of those players, especially the ones that are your leaders, like a Max Crosby, like a Malcolm Kuntz, guys like that, I think that's only going to help. And Robbie Leonard, mentioned him returning for another year as a defensive line coach. I didn't realize he had 13 years of experience in the league, but he's a 13-year experienced coach. So Robbie Leonard, I like the intensity he brings to the defensive line room. He's big time. Chip Kelly, talked about him, right? Very experienced play caller as an OC and as a head coach. We know that he, really buttered his bread at Oregon, has made his way to the NFL with the Eagles and the 49ers, back to college with UCLA and Ohio State, won in the national championship game as offensive coordinator. Now the Raiders have the opportunity to have him as their OC. They gave him a nice chunk of change to be their coordinator, $6 million. That's more money than D'Amico Ryans makes in Houston as the head coach. And that's where everyone thought he was going to end up. Everyone thought he was going to H-Town to be the offensive coordinator. He ends up with the Raiders. I still remember when we found out about that when we were in New Orleans ahead of Super Bowl 59. And I really could not believe that the Raiders landed him. But they showed that commitment. Again, going back to the serious, unserious, and for entertainment purposes only conversation, that let me know that they were operating as a serious organization. A couple other coaches, Marcus Robertson, defensive back coach, 18 years of experience in the league. He's been with the Raiders before, and he's had proof of concept as well. He's shown that he could be a really good defensive back coach and relate to the players as a former player. So I like him coming in, whereas opposed to last year, I like Ricky Manning. Yeah, Ricky Manning out of Fresno, California. I like him. He's a former player as well. There was just a lot of inexperience on Antonio Pierce's coaching staff and a lot of coaches. They had 29 coaches on the staff, and that was just too many. A lot of guys that AP tried to bring along with them, and they just didn't end up cutting it. Marcus Robertson has a history of being a really good defensive back coach. Dylan McCullough as the running backs coach, well-respected across the league, and obviously Ashton Jeanty has some big-time expectations. So if you're going to have big-time expectations, you want to have a well-respected, running back coach as well, and they do have that in Dylan McCullough. And let's not forget about Greg Olson, right? Quarterback coach, 23 years of experience. He's been with the Raiders multiple times. He's been with the Rams. He's been with the Seahawks. I mean, he's been around the league. Not a very good offensive coordinator, but a really good quarterback coach. And I think that that's going to help with Geno Smith. I think that's going to help with this Chip Kelly-led offense. I just think that that's going to be the X factor, is that all these coaches that are on this staff, proof of concept is out there on every one of them. And that ultimately is going to help this team moving forward. So that's my thoughts on the biggest strength, biggest weakness, and the biggest X factor when it comes to the silver and black as we are knocking on the door for training camp to get started. But, of course, I want to get your thoughts at 707-654-4693. It's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We'll hear from you next as we close out the show. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the show, and the first one is Betterhelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your work day. Of course, most of us can't quit our jobs or take endless vacations, but we can start small. Whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into your day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges. And that, my friends, is where BetterHelp comes in, right? Therapy can help you set healthier boundaries at work. Stress doesn't spill over into the rest of your life, which, of course, you do not want that. And, of course, you've always wanted to have more time to schedule appointments, right? Because you have a busy schedule. We all have busy schedules. So time is always something that you're trying to work with. We all come into that problem. Well, the flexibility of online therapy makes it easy to fit sessions into a busy schedule no matter where you are. So how do you make that happen? Well, as the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. All listeners of the Locked On Raiders podcast get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. I also want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Folks have been using FanDuel to track their favorite matchups for so long. The app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So you could place a same-game parlay, or you could watch a bet right into the ninth inning. FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, no problem. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open up the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. I want to start off with a mistake that I made. And, shout out to Ari. He didn't make the mistake, but I did. As putting together the podcast for Monday, I had a call from Cheese Grater Raider, and somehow, some way, the call actually didn't end up on the show. So I apologize that I was not trying to avoid the call. As I said, Ari didn't make the mistake. He got it on the YouTube show, but I did. So I want to go ahead and let you hear the call from Cheese Grater Raider. He's calling to talk about Tommy Mellott, who is a quarterback turned wide receiver out of Montana State and has a bone to pick with the comparison that he is getting. Here's Cheese Grater Raider, the call that should have been on Monday's show.
Hey, what's up, Q? What's up, Raider Nation? This is the Cheese Grater Raider. And I just have a real quick call, just get some off my chest, because you had a call about Tommy Mellott and how he's compared to Julian Edelman because he's a quarterback, went to receiver, and that's the reason for the comparison. Look, the Raiders had a quarterback and drafted him as a wide receiver, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I can't remember who he was. He was a fourth round pick, I believe, and he ended up getting traded before we could even use him. And he was a brother. And let me tell you, he didn't get one comparison to Julian Edelman. So let's stop with all the cap, and I don't like that we do, or that the analysts do this, but they compare. If it's a white receiver, they compare him to a white receiver. But it kills me because he could have skill sets of another receiver who is black. Tommy Mellott can fly. He's got more wheels than I've ever seen on a white boy. And I don't want to make this a race thing, but I just don't like how the comparisons are always because of race. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, Q, because I do think that's why the comparisons get made. It's not because of their skill set. And again, I think it should stop. Compare guys because of their skill set and their attributes, not because of a white player that he reminds you of another white player. That's all I got, Q. Go Raiders.
So that was the call. Again, I apologize. I did not miss the call on purpose. It was just one of those things that happened. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that back to the table. And as you heard me mention on Monday's show, because my explanation got onto the show, of course, but, the call from Cheese Grater Raider did not. And again, I apologize for that. Tommy Mellott, he compared himself to Julian Edelman. Tommy Mellott, it was the guy he looked up to was Julian Edelman and modeled his game after Julian Edelman. So I wasn't calling him Julian Edelman because he was white. I was calling him Julian Edelman because that's what he said. And all the research that I did following the selection of Tommy Mellott, that's what everyone told me, is that that's the guy that he looks up to whether it's punt return, wide receiver, whatever the case may be, being an X factor, that's who he modeled his game after. So, and it's funny because the initial call that Cheese Grater Raider kind of got upset about that I responded to and called him Julian Edelman, it's funny because the caller was actually referring to him as Hunter Renfrow. And I said, I don't think he's really Hunter Renfrow. I think he's more Julian Edelman, because he's, I think a little bit more dynamic. But that was it. That's what got everything started. But I wanted to make sure I passed the actual call along because I made that mistake. So I didn't want to, make anybody think that I was trying to avoid the call because that's just not the case. But thanks so much for the call, Cheese Grater. And again, apologies that I messed up and didn't get it on Monday's show. Up next, got a text from Tadrees in New Jersey. Hey, Q. Tadrees from New Jersey. Quick text. I haven't played Madden in years. This team has me excited to grab Madden 26 with the all-new player. Jared on Monday's show breaking down Chip Kelly's offense just gave me the blueprint to smack fools online. Just win, baby. That's Tadrees in New Jersey. Sorry about messing up your name. But yeah, no, that's funny, man. And Jared, I thought, did a fantastic job. Jared Smith from Fox Sports Radio, also BetMGM Network, did a great job. Little film study on Chip Kelly. He actually has a YouTube out that breaks down his offense. And if you want to learn a little bit more about Chip Kelly's offense and what he expects to see from the Raiders offense this year, definitely go check that out. And I'm with you. I haven't played Madden in so long. I haven't even bought Madden since Richard Sherman was on the cover. That was the last time that I bought the Madden game. And I don't even have a PS, whatever it is. What is it, PS5, PS6 now? I don't know. I think the last PS I had was PS3, maybe PS4, right? So it's been a minute. So if you do go get the game, man, ball out and have a lot of fun. Thanks for the text. Definitely appreciate you. That is something I used to do, though, every year. No joke. Before the season got going, once Madden dropped, I'd go get the game, and I'd play every game of the season. and see how the Raiders were going to do. Like that was my routine until the season started, just because I was like you. I was pumped up and excited about the next season of Raider football. Again, thanks for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Got a call from Cornhusker Raider. He's calling to talk about the conversation from Friday. It feels different, but does it feel right? Here's Cornhusker Raider.
What up, Q? It's Cornhusker Raider here. Just calling in. Listen to your show a lot of times, but I've kind of been behind the last few days. So just listen to your Friday show talking about does it feel right or is it right and all that stuff. And it feels right and it feels exciting. I was in your camp in the sense of I liked Antonio Pierce and I was kind of on board for another year. And I'll probably get some hate for this because we only had 4 wins last year, but I do think he helped us get our swagger back in a way, kind of build our trust with the organization again, that the Raiders do things a little bit differently and that they still see that, and kind of united us a little bit in that front. But I am all in on Pete Carroll. I love the Geno Smith trade. I am just ecstatic. Glad we got Jack Pesch's deal done as early as we did, and just looking forward to this season. That's it. Thanks for your show. Super pumped for this season. Just win, baby.
Cornhusker, thanks so much for the call. And I'm like you. I do think AP did some good things, like you said, getting the swag back for the Raiders way. He just didn't know how to go about getting it. Like, he knew what he wanted from this team. He had a good vision, but he just didn't know how to achieve it from, just lack of experience. Right? I mean, he wanted this team to be a very defensive team. He wanted it to be a run-heavy team and complimentary job on offense as far as the quarterbacks go, but he didn't know how to do it. As I mentioned in segment number 2, had 29 coaches on staff. He was listening to a lot of people, older coaches like Marvin Lewis, and then younger coaches as well that he had on the staff that he either played with in the league, was friends with, got, coached up by at some point. It was just something he tried to do, and I respect it. It didn't work. Where the proof of concept is here for Pete Carroll and what he's able to do, which is something that I think gets everyone pretty excited. So I'm excited about Coach Carroll. I'm excited about Geno Smith. I'm excited about Ashton Jeanty and what this team could possibly do and the noise they can make in 2025. Thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a pretty lengthy text here from Raider Eddie in Denver. Hey, Q, I'm following up on a caller regarding Malott comparison to white wide receivers. And it's true. Race definitely shapes our interpretations. I happen to think Malott may be a better running back than wide receiver after seeing his tape as a running quarterback in college. Related to that, earlier in the offseason, I said that Shedeur wasn't well-spoken in his interviews nor his press conferences, and I was called a racist. I'll pause there. I never called you a racist. All right, we'll move on. Afterwards, we got plenty of similar reports from insiders about Shedeur's lack of preparation, entitlement, and lack of humility. I shared a take I heard from Dan Jacobs of Denver 104.3 The Fan, where he criticized Shedeur's treatment of a teammate on the sideline that Dan witnessed. This was well before the draft. UQ doubted my relay of Dan's take and said you'd look into it and report back to us. Since then, we now have Shedeur with multiple speeding tickets, Shedeur seeming to blow these off, and folks like Mike Florio rightly calling out Shedeur's arrogance yet again. Q, do you have anything for us on the Dan Jacobs take, and have you evolved your take on Shedeur? Is it possible he's entitled and that he maybe didn't speak well in interviews and press conference? I think this is relevant because you pounded the table for Shedeur more than any other player leading up to the draft. You brought him up over and over, and it's been radio silence ever since. Love the show. Let's keep it real and just call out bias and misinformation when we see it. As Raider Eddie in Denver. Thank you as always for your text. Multiple layers here. As far as, comparisons and race, yeah, I mean, there's so many times that happens. I've said it many times. I'll say it many more times, whether you or anyone else believes it. Me, when I make decisions and I judge who I like and who I don't like and what I think is good for the team, race never plays a factor for me. Anyone who actually knows me, and I understand it's only a handful of people, know damn well that race plays no factor in my life. I can care less about what you look like. I can care less where you come from. I was raised that way, and I've raised my kids that way. I will never, ever, ever give a rip about race. I don't care if you're white, black, green, yellow, orange. That will never matter. So, yes, the interpretations come in from multiple folks. That is not why I said that Julian Edelman Tommy Malott was Julian Edelman-like. Like I explained on Monday's show, I said he was Julian Edelman-like because he said he was Julian Edelman-like. So that's one. Okay, as far as Shedeur goes, one, I understand the take that Dan from 104.3, Dan Jacobs, formerly of 104.3 The Fan, I actually did do some homework into that, and I've heard from many people that work in the Denver area, but it was a lot of conflicting reports on that guy in particular, and I wasn't going to bring that up because I don't know him. So that's why I chose not to speak on that. Now, You can believe that or not, but that's why I chose not to speak on it. Following that up, I also chose not to speak on Shedeur because as of April's draft and round 5, he's a member of the Cleveland Browns. So as a guy that only has 28 to 30 minutes to actually talk about the Raiders, I didn't think bringing up Shedeur and what he is or what he isn't is appropriate for this show or anyone cares on this show. Yes, I liked Shedeur for the Raiders. I have no problem with saying that. I think he's a hell of a quarterback. I think he's going to be a hell of a quarterback. But that's up to the Browns now to figure out, and that's up to him to figure out. I spoke on him right after he got drafted. I was surprised he went in the 5th round, but okay, so be it. Did he go into the meetings and maybe he wasn't prepared and maybe he just blew him off? Sure, that's possible. Young kids do stuff like that. I did it before when I was young. I've done things like that. Maybe you've never done that. Maybe you've been a perfect soul your whole life and have never, ever, got too high on yourself or thought too high on yourself. I don't know. I know I've done it. So maybe that's what it is. But it's now July. It's now training camp, and you're still talking about Shedeur. I can give you Emmett Golden's contact. Well, you can just hit him up on Twitter. I can give you Aaron Goldhammer's contact. I can give you, plenty of Tony Grossi's contact. Hit him up on Twitter, right? Those guys all work for ESPN Cleveland. They may want to know the information that you have on Shedeur, but I don't think anyone does at this stage of the game. He's now a Cleveland Brown. I've moved on. I think Raider Nation's moved on. If he turns out to be a good quarterback, good for him. If he turns out to be terrible, well, then he's terrible. And you were right, and that's okay. I'm all right with that. It is what it is, but that's why I haven't talked about Shedeur, because he's taking up time on this year's show, and I don't think anyone wants to take up time. They want to talk about the Silver and Black, who, oh, by the way, opened training camp today with head coach Pete Carroll. But thank you for the text. As always, hopefully this is the last time that we have to bring up race. Hopefully this is the last time that we have to bring up Shedeur. I'm sure it won't be, but that's how I feel. I've really, it's irritated me to no end, especially when race is brought into it, because then fingers start getting pointed. Real quick on that, I actually went on vacation, went to Hawaii, and I'm literally on a flight texting back and forth with someone who listens to this show from Buffalo, telling me how I lean towards black people and I give them more credit than I should. And that just bothers me to the point where I'm on vacation. I shouldn't worry about that. But that kind of stuff irritates me because I know that that's not me. Whether that means anything to you or anyone else, that's a whole nother subject. But those are the kind of things that bother me to the point where I thought about maybe I should just didn't even have a segment number 3 where I hear from Raider Nation, so I don't have to worry about feedback like that. It's in the works. It's stuff I'm thinking about amongst other things, right? Sometimes runs are great runs. Sometimes great runs come to an end, right? Like the Warriors were only a dynasty for so long, right? The Patriots were a dynasty for so long, and then everything comes to an end. So it's all stuff that weighs heavily on me, and that's why I even address it and try to acknowledge it, because I try to explain it. But it feels like the more I try to explain things, the worse and worse it gets. So I guess it is what it is. We'll see what we do moving forward. Appreciate your feedback, as always. Up next, and just got time for a couple quick ones, Henzo from the DMV. He's calling to talk about a great idea that apparently I came up with, but I didn't realize. Here's Henzo from the DMV.
Q and Raider Nation, and of course Ari. It's Henzo from the DMV. First off, I wanted to thank you guys for all that you do. Great for the nation. The other thing I wanted to ask is, you gave a great idea on Monday's podcast. Why don't we set up, just like you've done with Mount Rushmore, Raider podcast did with Mount Rushmore, why don't we do something along the lines of who has to step up at every position? Because we obviously need somebody at guard. We obviously need somebody at wide receiver. We obviously need somebody in secondary. And we obviously need somebody in linebacker. So who's going to step up at all those positions? Just a thought. Something I thought of. You brought it out there. But the other thing I wanted to say is this. I am so happy Jack Bech signed. I think he's going to be big for us. I think he'd be a solid receiver. Especially catching the ball after the run. And as well as just kind of possession. I know Jacoby's a bit of a possession receiver, because of he's not much of a burner. But very happy about both of those ideas. Please give me one more thing. Just win, baby.
Henzo, thanks so much for the call. Going through each position, breaking it down, who needs to step up. That's a good idea. I like it. Maybe one day we can focus on the offense. Maybe one day we can focus in on the defense. Another day, special teams or whatever the case may be. I think that could be a good idea. I still got to kind of think in my mind how to formulate it so it's not a 15 or 20-minute segment. Maybe it's just you split it in two. I don't know. But I feel like it's something that we could probably figure out. I got it written down. So, I'll have it. I'll see it, and I'll figure out somehow how to break it down in my mind. And once I'm able to break it down in my mind, then I can easily break it down on the show. But Henzo, thanks so much for that. I do appreciate the call. And we'll close out with a text from DJ Raider from Arizona. It's a little lengthy text, but we'll close out with this anyway. I know we went over our time a little bit, but that's how it happens every once in a while. This text says, "Hey, Q, DJ Raider from Arizona here. I've been in the Northeast visiting family the last week and a half, so I'm playing catch up. One take I have, I couldn't disagree more with ESPN's analytics guy, Seth Walder's take concerning the move he disliked the most for the Raiders, drafting Ashton Genty. To say the running back position is one of the least important positions on the field, I'm sure it must have be driven by his numbers crunching. But when your team was dead last in rushing and you finished at 4-13, most Raider fans will probably disagree with Mr. Walters. I'm also 100% sure Eagles fans would disagree with this guy as well. Think they have won the Super Bowl without Saquon? We all know that answer. Further, with Coach C's extreme emphasis on the run game, how could they pass on this generational talent? Like Saquon, Genty's abilities will provide such a positive ripple effect across the entire team. I'll even go one further and state in my heart, I firmly believe Ashton Genty will not only live up to the hype and become the centerpiece of the Raiders offense, but will break Eric Dickerson's NFL rushing record of 1,808 yards and Tim Brown's NFL rookie record for all-purpose yards of 2,317. September 7th, can't get here soon enough. Let's go Raiders. Just win, baby. That's DJ Raider from Arizona. And yeah, I think most people, including myself, disagreed with Seth Walder and his thoughts on drafting Ashton Genty at number 6. He was coming at it from an analytics point, like you said, numbers crunching. He was talking about contracts and the value. So it was one of those things where all of a sudden now Ashton Genty is one of the highest paid running backs and hasn't ran the rock yet in the National Football League. So that was part of it. I had him on the show to give a little bit of explanation. He laughed because he knew that Raider Nation wasn't going to be a big fan. But I think the biggest key to this whole thing is, who would you rather have? Now, there's some that could say Armand Membu, the right tackle out of Missouri, would have been the better selection at 6, and maybe they are proven to be right. But there wasn't too many guys that were selected at number 6 or after number 6 this past draft, and I'm like, yep, you know what? The Raiders really should have had that guy as opposed to Ashton Genty. That I think tells you all you need to know. But again, we'll know for sure once we actually see the action on the field. But thanks so much. Hopefully you had a really good vacation, and thanks so much for playing catch up. We definitely appreciate that here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So we'll talk to Pete Carroll today. Excited about that. Anything that he says significant, we'll bring to the show. We'll get back to more news and notes, and we'll see what else we bring to the table here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until tomorrow's show and everything. Oh, no, don't forget, on Wednesday, we'll have another episode of the Raiders Squad Show as well. So I'll look forward to that coming up. We won't do it on Monday and Thursday this week. We're actually going to do it on Monday and Wednesday because Big Lincoln is traveling. So I'll remind you of that coming up on Wednesday morning show as well. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.